They called it Galactic Defense Academy, which was hilarious because no one there had defended anything in a millennium. Not a border, not a colony, not even their lunch trays. The students were apex species, which is code for we used to be scary. Then we discovered PowerPoint. In the main amphitheater, a triple-deck stadium carved into the shell of a retired war moon, Dr. Flarn Spindlecheeks, a 9-limbed beetle in a lab coat, 2 sizes too smug, clattered across the presentation dais and announced, "Observe, tactical ineptitude." The lights dimmed, the screen lit up, and a hilariously butchered combat reel began to play. Slow-motion footage of terrified humans dodging plasma fire, a private crying behind a bush, another throwing a grenade backwards. Laughter erupted from rows of fur, scales, feathers, and smug telepaths. This was Flarn's magnum opus, his exhibit HUMAN, used to teach galactic cadets that Earthlings were what happened when soft tissue learned to scream. Which is why no one noticed the woman in row Zulu back corner, feet up like this was a bad Netflix night. She wore standard Earth uniform, matte black tactical armor with 0 flare and maximum trauma. Her hair was pulled into a regulation tight braid. Her clipboard had 3 killstreak stickers on the back. Her name tag read, Lit CMDR A Clutch, and she had the resting expression of someone who once waterboarded a warlord with his own coffee. "As you can see," Flarn preened, zooming in on a soldier slipping on his own intestines, "the Terran combatant panicked, failed to execute flank cohesion, most likely soiled himself in the process." More laughter. Enter Cadet Jerkthroat. Scalebiter, 6'5" of lizard arrogance with biceps that believed in their own democracy. He twisted in his seat to leer at Andy. "Hey, hug officer," he sneered. "Did your clipboard run out of apologies?" Andy didn't blink. She just looked at him like he was a chair leg in a bar fight. Useful, but not interesting. Flarn, sensing blood in the oxygen, turned. "Lieutenant Commander Clutch," he chirped, "as the Earth's chosen non-combat observer, do you have a comment?" Andy slowly lowered her feet, clicked her pen once. "I'm good." And, just like that, something shifted. Not in the room. In the room's oxygen. You could hear how still it got. How every apex predator developed a new emotion. A twitchy, confused kind of dread. Like a rabbit realizing it's in the same room as something that doesn't blink. Jerkthroat, trying. To reassert dominance, snorted. "What's the matter? Nothing to say? Or are you too busy taking notes for your please don't vaporize us diplomacy report?" Andy exhaled, once, like her lungs had already calculated his funeral costs. "I was waiting," she said flatly, "to see if any of you would notice that simulation had been edited." Flarn's mandibles clicked. "Excuse me? Scene at timestamp 0324, loop from a drill, training exercise." They cut the sound because the soldier was yelling, "Blank rounds, my dudes! You're mocking a fire drill." A few chuckles died in alien throats. Flarn wobbled indignantly. "Regardless, the footage proves that you've never seen a real war," Andy said, her voice now a scalpel wrapped in boredom. "You run simulations. We run funerals." A silence bloomed, thick and carnivorous. Someone in the upper deck actually swallowed loud enough to echo. Jerkthroat snarled, but his tail was curled a little tighter now. "You think you're scary because you've been shot at?" Andy smiled, not with her mouth, but with that quiet, merciless tilt of her head that said she'd already seen how he'd die, and whether or not she had time for lunch afterward. "No," she said. "I'm scary because I remember it." And then she stood, clipboard in hand, boots echoing against the war moon's hollow bones, and every apex species present, every smug theoretical warfighter who'd never bled for anything but academic rank, watched the soft skin from Earth walk out like she'd just graded them all a tactical F, and was coming back with red ink, a chair leg, and no witnesses. The hallway outside the amphitheater smelled like recycled shame and synthetic lemon polish, the kind janitors sprayed when they knew someone had been emotionally disemboweled nearby. Andy walked it slow, boots clicking like judgment, clipboard tucked under her arm like it had a body count. And it probably did. Behind her, silence still rippled through the auditorium like an aftershock. But ahead, ahead, came the hiss of ego regrouping. Jerkthroat Scalebiter and his usual reptilian cheer squad were waiting in the corridor like low-budget boss battles, arms crossed, tails flicking, all of them radiating the kind of threat level you usually associate with a toddler holding a butter knife. "You walk like you own the place," Jerkthroat muttered, leaning in close enough to violate 3 codes of interspecies etiquette and 1 basic law of personal space. "Tell me something, Hug Monkey. Did Earth run out of real soldiers?" Andy stopped. Just stopped. Turned her head an inch, then slowly swiveled to face him, like a gun turret deciding whether or not to waste the ammo. "We didn't run out," she said softly, tone made of ice and boot polish. "We ran out past you." Jerkthroat blinked. His crew blinked. A Glorbon cadet reflexively triggered its camouflage glands and disappeared into a potted plant. Andy took a step forward, casually tapping her clipboard against her thigh. "You think we got here by winning?" she continued, voice now a velvet hammer. "Nah. We crawled here, up from the bottom, past carnivores, parasites, predators with better teeth and longer claws and acid spit. You know what we had? Another step. Fear. Just enough to keep moving. Desperation. Enough to improvise. Rage. Enough to invent new ways to kill things that already killed us. Another step. You know what happens when you mock the prey species that learn to break predators? Final step. Close enough now that Jerkthroat flinched. They become the new apex, but they don't forget the chair legs." She flicked the edge of her clipboard up like a mic drop and walked away again, leaving nothing but stunned silence and a faint smell of singed arrogance. The next morning, the Academy's main combat, Dome announced a voluntary demonstration of interspecies sparring capabilities, which in translation meant, "Let's all pretend this isn't about the human." Flarn was there, barely hiding his mandibles clacking in excitement. The bleachers were packed with cadets and instructors holding evaluation slates, snacks, and 1 emergency medical drone that had already started hovering near Andy's corner like it smelled narrative tension. On the opposite side of the dome stood Cadet Brickwall von Punchgut, the pride of the Cracklet Horde, a creature designed by biology's drunk uncle. 8 feet tall, built like a vending machine full of bricks, 6 fists, 3 eyebrows, no neck. His strategy so far in training had been, apply fist to problem until problem is a smear. When Flarn announced Andy as his opponent, the arena let out a gasp that briefly disrupted the climate control. Brickwall grinned. Andy didn't. She just rolled her shoulders, cracked her knuckles once, loud enough to cause emotional damage, and walked to the center like she was about to check someone's homework and find treason. "Combatants ready?" Flarn chirped. Brickwall roared. Andy yawned. The match began. Brickwall charged like a caffeine-fueled rhino with abandonment issues. Andy sidestepped. That's all. A graceful lean, a pivot, and 1 finger jabbed directly into a nerve bundle just below his 3rd shoulder. Brickwall stumbled. The arena hushed. Andy stepped in again, barely touching, wrist flick, elbow tap, knee shift, like she was entering cheat codes on a living slab of steak. Every strike was surgical, economical, and horrifyingly casual. Within 2 minutes, Brickwall was unconscious, twitching gently like a crashed operating system. Andy leaned over him, glanced at Flarn, and said flatly, "Pressure point. Lights off. Next." Then she walked away while the emergency drone began weeping in binary. By afternoon, the Academy wasn't whispering about the human anymore. They were whispering around her, like maybe sound itself didn't want to make eye contact. Instructors were holding impromptu syllabus reviews. Students were rechecking the Glossary to make sure Terran didn't have an asterisk that meant unlicensed god of pain. Jerkthroat Scalebiter hadn't been seen in 3 hours. One rumor claimed he was still standing in the corridor, tail twitching, trying to come up with a comeback that didn't involve tears. And Flarn, dear, sweet Dr. Spindlecheeks, had called an emergency faculty meeting. Not about Andy, of course, no. Officially, it was about interspecies disciplinary calibration. Unofficially, it was about what the hell had just walked into their war school and rewritten the syllabus with bruises. But Andy? Andy just found the cafeteria, stole a plate of something that looked like spicy algae lasagna, and sat in the corner reading her own file. Because sometimes, the best way to win a war is to look bored while everyone else realizes they've already lost. The summons came via drone, standard bureaucratic cube, hovering like it paid taxes and judged your font choices. It beeped once, dropped a holocard on Andy's lasagna plate, and zoomed off like it owed her money. She wiped the algae sauce off the data print with a napkin, scanned the header, and sighed. Crisis Review Committee, Office of Institutional Stabilization. Translation. They were panicking. She finished her lunch first, out of spite. The meeting room was 10 degrees colder than necessary and smelled like anxiety, floor polish, and 6 species of deodorant failing under pressure. Commander Pompbladder presided from behind a desk made entirely of polished ego and ergonomic regret. He was flanked by a pair of assistant provosts who looked like sentient migraines and a disciplinary AI nicknamed Grievance Hub 7, a hovering orb with passive-aggressive LED eyebrows. Andy walked in without saluting, without flinching, without the decency to pretend she wasn't already bored. Lieutenant Commander Clutch, Pompbladder croaked, voice wobbling like he was trying to cough up a regulation. We are deeply concerned about your recent conduct. Andy raised an eyebrow. You mean the part where I didn't die, or the part where someone else did? One of the provosts made a scandalized clicking noise. Grievance Hub 7 blinked red and quietly updated someone's spreadsheet. This is a training institution, the other provost snapped. Not an arena for combat theater. Andy sat down without asking, stretched her legs like they had jurisdiction, and tilted her head. Combat theater, she repeated. Cute. Is that where you let kids pretend to win wars with dramatic lighting and slow music? Pompbladder puffed up. You've caused unrest among the cadets, disrespected the Academy's teaching staff, and introduced unauthorized combat techniques. We have reason to suspect espionage. Andy smiled slowly, not wide, not happy. The kind of smile you see right before a gunfight or a really awkward family reunion. You're right, she said. I was sent here under false pretenses. I'm not here to learn anything. I'm here to decide if you're worth saving. The silence that followed hit the room like a black hole made of bad decisions. Grievance Hub 7 blinked. One provost froze mid-gasp. Pompbladder's throat sac visibly deflated. Andy stood, pulled a data chip from her inner pocket, and dropped it onto the table with a little click. Play it. No one moved. That wasn't a request, she added, still calm. And that made it worse. The chip activated. The lights dimmed. The holo projector flared to life with no musical overture, no dramatization, just raw footage. Black space, twisted debris fields, planetary crusts turned inside out, ships dissolving mid-maneuver like paper caught in acid rain. And in the middle of it all, flickering and monstrous, something that defied geometry. Teeth and tendrils made of non-physics, laughter that warped comms channels, and a field of void-eating creatures clawing reality like it owed them rent. The nibblers, the real ones, not rumor, not warning, not myth. Behind them, faint but clear, the outlines of human ships. Patchwork, battered, firing weapons cobbled together from desperation and nuclear spite. One screamed something in Terran standard before kamikaze slamming into a nibbler's eye. The feed cut out. No one spoke. One of the provosts blinked. wetly, and vomited into their own filtration sac. Pomp Bladder finally croaked, Where was this recorded? Andy leaned forward. Beta Graveyard 6, 39 hours before it ceased to be a thing. But the council said they were scouting anomalies. The council lied, she said flatly. They're not anomalies. They're scouts. They eat stars. They're not here to conquer. They're here to consume. You're not an opponent. You're a snack. Grievance Hub 7 whirred uncertainly and quietly pinged the existential threat database. Andy grabbed the data chip, tucked it back into her vest, and looked Pomp Bladder in the eye. So no, I didn't come here to make friends. I came to see if any of you were salvageable, because Earth's already seen what's coming, and you're not even scared yet. Pomp Bladder tried to speak, but only managed a faint wheezing sound that sounded like paperwork crying. If you want to expel me, go ahead, Andy said. Just make sure you note it in your obituary. Then she turned, walked out. No fanfare, just boots on tile, doors hissing open in resignation. Behind her, the silence fractured into the low murmur of people realizing their entire worldview just burst into flames and then got eaten by something with teeth in 11 dimensions. In the hallway, the janitor drone was still cleaning up emotional residue from the morning's panic. Andy paused, watched it scrape up a puddle of spilled shame with industrial-grade compassion, and muttered, Might want to stock up, buddy. Things are about to get real dumb, real fast. The drone beeped once in agreement, then sprayed more lemon polish over the memory of arrogance. Andy kept walking, because panic hadn't even started yet. The War Assembly was called under Article 44B of the Emergency Curriculum Override Protocol, which was the academic equivalent of setting your syllabus on fire while screaming. Cadets poured into the Great Hall in varying states of confusion. Panic and unearned confidence, each gripping data pads like they were shields against the unknown. The instructors looked worse. Half of them had clearly slept in their offices. The other half looked like they'd tried to update their doctrine and accidentally summoned an existential crisis. Commander Pomp Bladder sat slumped in the central moderator chair, eyes glassy, ceremonial sash stained with resignation. Andy walked straight up the main aisle like she'd been called to deliver the weather. And today's forecast was pain, with a 90% chance of institutional collapse. Someone tried to introduce her. She ignored it, took the podium, looked out at the sea of apex species with superiority complexes and zero trauma resilience, and said, You're going to die. The silence was immediate, cold, clean, satisfying. But not because you're weak, she added, pacing slowly. Not because you're stupid. Not even because your entire strategy manual reads like it was written by a committee of spoiled raccoons who've never been punched in the face. A few alien ears flattened. Good. You're going to die, she continued, because you think war is about control, about symmetry, about principles. You've spent the last 1,000 years gaming conflict like it's a rules-based arena. Predictable enemies, polite tactics, simulated death, participation ribbons for tactical effort. She stopped, stared directly into the row of top cadets. You don't know fear, not real fear. Not the kind that curdles your spine and whispers that you're not coming home. Not the kind that makes you sharpen spoons into weapons because your sidearm ran out of hope. The murmurs had stopped entirely now. She had them, trapped, unblinking, and terrified to look away. The enemy doesn't want to conquer you, Andy said, voice dropping an octave. It wants to consume you, to erase you from the language of physics. You are not at war. You are at risk. She threw a holochip into the air. New footage, this time from Earth's experimental psych tactics unit. A nibbler being temporarily staggered by strobing bursts of chaotic sound and conflicting quantum harmonics. Human soldiers in ragged armor singing sea shanties while luring a void beast into a gravitational net made from recycled debris and spite. a squad laughing as they detonated themselves mid-extraction just to buy time for a single escape pod. "This isn't doctrine," Andy said as the images flickered out. "This is desperation science, panic logistics, tactical trauma." She pointed at a crystalline cadet who'd fainted halfway through the third clip. "You asked last week what qualified me to critique your battle theory. You wanted credentials." She yanked back her sleeve. Scarred tissue, burn rings. One tattoo half erased by plasma damage. "This is my curriculum vitae. I buried friends who knew more about pain than you know about textbooks." She turned again, pacing like a storm in boots. "So here's what's going to happen. Effective immediately, I am your strategic innovation overlord. Yes, that's a real title now. I wrote it on a whiteboard and threatened the paperwork into compliance." Flarn, sitting in the front row, looked like his limbs. "We're trying to file a restraining order against each other. New drills begin tomorrow. Mixed species teams, combat at random hours, simulations that don't reset. We're going to see how you function when the rules stop liking you." Someone in the back laughed nervously. Andy's gaze snapped to them. "Did I say something funny?" "No, ma'am," the cadet croaked. "Then congratulations," she said. "You just volunteered to lead tonight's improv ambush scenario. Pack glitter grenades and bring a kazoo." A visible shiver rippled through the crowd. Someone else raised a hand, slowly, like the air might bite. "Permission to ask, what are the odds we survive all this?" Andy considered that, seriously, quietly, then said, "Higher than 0, if you stop pretending survival is an entitlement." The room digested that in a silence so dense it bent sarcasm. Andy stepped back from the podium, turned to Pomp Bladder, and added, "If you're still unsure about authorizing this, I can show more footage. The part with the screaming moons is pretty compelling." Pomp Bladder didn't respond. He just nodded. Once. The smallest, saddest nod in bureaucratic history. The cadet stood. The instructors followed. And for the first time in living galactic memory, the Academy stopped being a school and started becoming something dangerous. It started with screaming, not the terrified kind, but the musical variety, an off-key, midnight rendition of War Crimes and Whiskey echoing down Corridor 6, punctuated by glitter grenades detonating in waves of sequin shrapnel. Cadets dove for cover as tactical kazoo fire blared from ductwork ambush teams, and somewhere in the chaos, someone deployed a fog machine made entirely of shame and fluorescent dye. The new training program had begun. They called it Clutch Protocol. Andy called it Tuesday. Within 72 hours, the cadets stopped laughing. Within a week, they stopped bleeding where it mattered. Sleep was rationed. Meals were earned. Classrooms turned into ambush arenas. Instructors were captured mid-lecture, duct-taped to chairs, and forced to recite obsolete battle doctrine while blindfolded and pelted with marshmallow projectiles that exploded into smoke. Morale plummeted, then inverted, then somehow stabilized at a frequency known only to human combat psychologists and caffeine addicts. By the second week, Commander Pumpbladder had retreated into a panic nest made of shredded administrative scrolls. Andy offered him tea. He wept into it. But numbers didn't lie. Survival metrics climbed, reaction times improved, and for the first time in Academy history, a joint operation drill between 10 apex species didn't end in vomiting or litigation. Jerkthroat Scalebiter, now limping slightly from a team bonding incident involving a ceiling-mounted toaster and a surprise chokehold, approached Andy during a rest window. "Permission to speak freely," he muttered. "Granted," Andy replied, not looking up from her datapad full of trauma math. "This training sucks." "Correct. I think I'm learning." "Unfortunate." He nodded, then wandered off, quietly humming the Terran battle anthem. "If I die before Revel, loot my snacks." Around day 19, the real test arrived. A long-range probe intercepted a ripple in space-time. Nibbler scouts too close. For comfort, chewing on the outer layer of a mining moon like it was a warm sandwich. The Council issued a panic alert. The Academy issued a fresh round of PowerPoint slides. Andy issued an ultimatum. Give me control of the response, or give them your population in alphabetical order. They voted in 12 seconds. The mission, launched in 16, 4 squads, multi-species, no simulations, real gear, real stakes. Andy led from the front, riding drop pod Alpha 1 into orbit, while sipping coffee from a thermoseal mug that said, "This isn't even my final form." The landing zone was hell, molten rock, time distortions, ambient static that whispered, in Morse code about teeth. And there they were, nibblers. Just 3 for now, pulsing like inverted stars, gnawing at gravity, hissing with hunger only physics could hear. The squads hesitated. Andy didn't. She fired the signal flare. Neon. Green, encoded in binary sarcasm. Operation. Rude welcome. The cadets hit the ground like trained chaos. No hesitation, no delay. They swarmed, split, confused, adapted. Tactics bled into instinct. Human unpredictability fused with alien brutality. One Glorban detonated its own. Arm for distraction. A Krautian used its molted exoskin as a shield. And Andy rode the back of a shrieking void beast while stabbing it with an electrified data spike, shouting, "I wrote your obituary in crayon!" The creatures fell. Not easily, but definitively. The last one imploded in a burst of eldritch static, leaving behind only the faint smell of ozone and wet terror. The squads exfiltrated with all members alive, shaken, burned, grinning. At the debrief, no one said anything for a long moment. Then one cadet, a quiet amphibian named Splick, stood up and asked, "So, did we pass?" Andy looked up, face blank, then smiled. "You didn't pass. You survived. That's better. Exams are optional. Existence isn't." Applause didn't follow. It couldn't. They were too tired, too changed. But they stood. And that was enough. Weeks later, back at the Academy, the old war doctrines had been reduced to ceremonial coasters. The curriculum now included classes like improvised threat humor, crisis nap techniques, and tactical betrayal recovery. Andy was officially listed as Strategic Innovation Overlord on payroll, though her badge just said Warlord Adjacent. Her office was half weapons locker, half coffee bar, and always smelled faintly of victory and antiseptic. When the new class of cadets arrived, wide-eyed and unscarred, they were handed their welcome packet. It included a photo of Andy holding a chair leg and one sentence written in bold. "This wasn't war school, this was daycare. Time to grow teeth, kids."